Hello and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to give you a tour of SQL Server Management Studio. To start SQL Server Management Studio, I'm just going to type in SQL in this search box in my Windows machine. And I'll see SQL Server Management Studio pop up, and I'll go ahead and click that to launch it. And SQL Server Management Studio will launch. Now, I'm assuming you've already installed SQL Server Management Studio on your machine. Now, SQL Server is a Windows product, so it's meant to work with a Windows operating system. It can be installed on a MacBook, but you'll have to perform some kind of special setup to get it to work on a MacBook. Something like a dual boot that what you will do is set up your MacBook to boot into Windows or something like that. There are other ways, but it requires some special configuration. Now, there are two ways, there are actually a few different ways you can log in. One of them is Windows Authentication. Windows Authentication is based on your Windows account, so all you have to do is just click Connect, and it should just start up SQL Server. Now, the server name, normally it's already set for you when you install SQL Server, and you can just leave it as is. But if there are problems, if it won't start up, you can try, there are a few different things you can try that usually works for my students. So what you can do is um, you can go to, you can try this dot backslash SQL Express, or you can try localhost backslash SQL Express, or just the word localhost. You also want to be sure that service.msc is running in the background. So check your services and make sure service.msc is running. So let's jump back over to SQL Server. The other way is the other authentication method is SQL Server Authentication. And that's going to be based on a login you create and provide within SQL Server. So if I'm just going to go ahead and click that, and then the login, the default is SA, but really you can change this to whatever you want it to. And you have to provide a strong password. There are advantages and disadvantages to using um, SQL Server Authentication. And that's true with Windows Authentication. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Connect, and I'll provide a link to the advantages and disadvantages of the two authentication types, or the different authentication types. So I'm going to go ahead and click Connect, and it's telling me an update is available. I'm not going to install that update at the moment. So we'll start in the upper left-hand corner with the File menu. So we can connect to Object Explorer or disconnect. So we're already connected, so I'll click Disconnect. And what that does is that disconnects from any databases. It's just going to disconnect our connection. And now I'm going to click Connect, and when we click Connect, it's going to require us to connect to the database engine again. Also, in the File menu, you can open a new file or a new query window or even a project. You can also just start a new query, a new file, new project, or open an existing project or folder. So why don't we just go ahead and open up a new query window? Another way to open up a new query window is just type on this button here that says New Query. And it opens up a editor window where we can type our SQL queries. So when we come in here and we type a query, I'm not going to type one now, I'm just going to type some garbage in there. But when we come in here and we type a query, then the save options will appear. So we can save what we just typed or save it as. And when we save as, it's going to allow us to give it a name. And you want to give it a meaningful name when you save it. We can also print, and there's an option to open up recent files or recent projects. Now notice all of our files have a .sql extension, and that's just the norm. Now let's go over to the right, and here we have our edit window, and we have a lot of the common editing features. We can find and replace text within our files, or actually even in an entire project. We can cut and paste. We can delete things. And we have a IntelliSense option here. And I'm just covering the main features and functions that you will use, that you may encounter. And again, query allows us to execute a query that we've typed in. And some of these are advanced features that you likely won't use very often, unless you're a database administrator, maybe. And then let's jump over to Windows. Let's say you get your Windows all out of sync, and they're just maybe they're just out of sync. What you can do is you can just click on Window and then reset your window layout. And it's going to ask you if you really want to do that, and you can just say yes. And then under View, it gives you different options to view the different toolbars you can view. So you can just play with this if you want to. The Solution Explorer is over to the right. I just selected to open it back up. So let's go down to the some of these icons. Some of these features are quite useful. Again, we have icons to cut, copy, and paste. We can undo. So I'm just going to undo the garbage that I typed in, or redo. Now let's go to the next line. Here we have a drop-down window, and we can just select a different database. Right now I have a lot of different databases installed. We can select any of our databases. So let's say we want to run a query on something. You want to make sure you're selecting the database that you want to run your query on. Then we can execute our query just by clicking on this. We don't have to go to the menu to execute. Under query, we can also execute under query, but it's easier to just click on this execute button. Another very useful feature, let's say we have a lot of lines here to our query, and I'm not attempting to type any actual SQL right now. I'm just typing in garbage. But let's say we have a lot of lines here. We can highlight what we want to comment out, and we can just click the comment icon here, and it'll comment out multiple lines. And we can just undo that, or undo one line, or I'm just going to undo all of them. So that's useful. We can also indent. So I'm going to highlight and indent or unindent. So these are useful features, these icons. They're kind of like shortcuts. Now let's go over to Object Explorer. Here we have this top level SQL Server database. And I'm just going to go ahead and drop it down. And the main folder you'll be working with is the databases folder. So I'm going to go ahead and expand the databases folder, and I can see all the different databases that I have installed. Now, there are some default system databases that will be installed. The first one is the master database, and the master database contains information on all the databases that exist on SQL Server, on your SQL Server installation. The model database is a template database used when you create a new database. The temp database, tempdb here, that's used to store temporary objects like tables or store procedures. And then there's something called MSDB. MSDB stores information related to backups. Now I'm just going to highlight model again because I don't think I highlighted it before. Now model is a template database again, and it's just used when you create a new database. So you're going to see these databases under system databases. And then any databases you install are going to be underneath that, depending on your configuration. Most likely they'll be underneath here. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up one of my databases that's installed, sorry. And then you can see lots of other folders. There's a database diagrams folder that will hold diagrams of your database. Then there's all the tables that are going to be associated with your database. Then there are views, and the programmability folder is another one that you'll use potentially often. So again, I'm just covering the different features that you will use most often. Some of these features you won't use very often, if ever. So I'm not going to talk about them. So thank you for joining me. I hope that helps you with your SQL Server endeavors.